In the magnificent palaces of ancient Egypt, there lived a woman renowned throughout the land for her exceptional beauty. Her name was Zuleika, and she was the wife of one of Egypt's most powerful officials, known as the chief or master of the household. Within the palace walls, she enjoyed every luxury and comfort that wealth and status could provide. She had servants at her beck and call, wore the finest silks and jewels, and lived a life that many could only dream of. However, beneath this exterior of privilege and comfort, a dangerous passion was slowly consuming her heart, eating away at her peace and threatening to destroy everything she held dear. This overwhelming obsession would soon lead to events that would change multiple lives forever. The object of her burning desire was a young slave who worked within their household. His name was Joseph, Prophet Yusuf, peace be upon him. But this was no ordinary young man. Joseph was not only blessed with extraordinary physical beauty that captured the attention of all who saw him, but more importantly, he possessed a moral beauty and spiritual purity that shone even brighter than his external appearance. The divine beauty that Allah had bestowed upon him would soon become both a blessing and a tremendous test, one that would define his character and determine his destiny. As the days turned into weeks and months, Zuleika's feelings of attraction grew stronger and more consuming. What had perhaps begun as innocent admiration had transformed into an all-consuming passion that she could no longer control or hide. Her thoughts were dominated by Joseph, and she found herself creating opportunities to see him, to be near him, to engage him in conversation. The other servants in the household began to notice the way their mistress looked at the young Joseph. They whispered among themselves about the intensity in her eyes when she watched him work, about how she would call for him more frequently than necessary, about how her entire demeanor would change when he entered a room. And then, that fateful day arrived, a day that would alter the course of multiple lives and become a turning point in this ancient tale of desire, temptation, and unwavering faith. Zuleika had been planning this moment for weeks, perhaps months. She had carefully calculated when the household would be quiet, when her husband would be away on business, when the other servants would be occupied with their duties. She called Joseph to the private chambers of the palace, to a section where they would be completely alone and undisturbed. As Joseph entered the room, perhaps expecting to receive instructions for some household task, Zuleika moved swiftly. She secured the doors behind him, ensuring there would be no interruption, no escape from what she had planned. The room fell silent except for the sound of her footsteps as she approached him with clear intention. "Come to me," she said, her voice heavy with desire and expectation. This was the trap she had set, the moment she had been anticipating. In her mind, she had convinced herself that Joseph, as a servant in her household, would have no choice but to comply with her wishes. But Prophet Joseph, blessed with a pure heart and unshakable moral principles, immediately recognized the gravity of the situation. Without hesitation, he stepped backward, creating distance between them. His response was swift and clear. "I seek refuge in Allah," he declared firmly. "Your husband is my master who has treated me kindly and with honor. Indeed, wrongdoers will never achieve true success." This rejection struck Zuleika like a physical blow. The humiliation of being refused by someone she considered beneath her social status ignited a fury that she had never experienced before. Her desire transformed into rage, her love into a dangerous obsession for control. As Joseph turned toward the door, desperate to escape this compromising situation, Zuleika lunged forward in a final attempt to stop him. In her desperation, she grabbed at his garment, and in the struggle that ensued, she tore his shirt from behind as he pulled away from her grasp. At that precise moment, as if orchestrated by divine timing, the door opened. Zuleika's husband, the chief of the household, entered the room unexpectedly. The scene that greeted him was shocking. His wife and Joseph in apparent struggle, with Joseph's garment torn. In that instant, Zuleika's true character was revealed. Faced with the possibility of exposure and disgrace, the woman who had just moments before been pleading with Joseph to fulfill her desires immediately shifted into survival mode. With lightning speed, she transformed from pursuer to victim, from aggressor to the wronged party. "What should be the punishment for someone who intended evil against your household?" she cried out dramatically, pointing an accusing finger at Joseph. "Should he not be imprisoned or receive painful punishment?" The accusation hung heavy in the air. Here was a powerful woman, the wife of one of Egypt's most influential men, claiming that their young slave had attempted to assault her. The social dynamics of the time meant that her word would typically be accepted without question, while Joseph's voice as a slave would carry little weight. But Joseph, with the calm dignity that characterized his entire life, spoke the truth simply and clearly. It was she who sought to seduce me. The room fell silent as the two conflicting accounts hung in the air. Who was telling the truth? How could such a matter be resolved fairly? It was then that divine wisdom provided a solution. The Quran tells us that a member of her husband's family, someone with knowledge and wisdom, suggested a test that would reveal the truth. If his shirt is torn from the front, then she has told the truth, and he is among the liars. But if his shirt is torn from behind, then she has lied, and he is among the truthful. The examination was swift and conclusive. Joseph's garment was torn from behind, exactly as it would be if someone were trying to escape while being grabbed from behind. The physical evidence spoke louder than any words could. The truth was undeniable. Joseph was innocent, and Zuleika was the one who had been pursuing him. However, this revelation of truth did not bring the relief and justice that Joseph might have hoped for. Instead, it created a new and even more complex problem for the household. The chief, Zuleika's husband, found himself in an impossible position. He now knew that his wife had attempted to seduce their slave and had then lied about it when caught. Yet, as a man of high social standing, he could not afford the scandal that would erupt if this matter became public knowledge. His solution was to attempt to bury the matter entirely. To Joseph, he said firmly, "Turn away from this matter and speak of it to no one." To his wife, he said with stern disappointment, "Ask forgiveness for your sin. Indeed, you were among the wrongful." On the surface, this might have seemed like a reasonable resolution. The truth had been established. Joseph's innocence had been proven, and life could potentially return to normal. But the devil's plans often run much deeper than surface appearances suggest. Zuleika, rather than feeling grateful for her husband's discretion or remorseful for her actions, instead found herself consumed with an even greater hatred and resentment toward Joseph. The humiliation of being rejected by him was now compounded by the shame of being exposed as a liar. Her desire had transformed into something much darker, a burning need for revenge. Despite her husband's instructions to let the matter rest, secrets have a way of leaking out, especially in the gossip-filled environment of ancient palace life. Soon, whispers began circulating throughout the city. The chief's wife has fallen in love with her slave, they said. She has lost all sense of propriety and honor. These rumors spread like wildfire through Egyptian society, reaching the ears of other noble women who had always been somewhat jealous of Zuleika's status and beauty. Now they had found the perfect opportunity to criticize and judge her publicly. The gossip became so widespread that Zuleika could no longer ignore it or pretend it didn't exist. But Zuleika, rather than accepting responsibility for her actions or working to repair the damage she had caused, decided instead to justify her behavior by demonstrating to these critics exactly why any woman would have acted as she did. She planned an elaborate gathering, inviting all the noble women who had been gossiping about her to her palace. It was to be an elegant afternoon social event, complete with fresh fruits and delicacies. As the women settled in for what they expected to be a normal social gathering, Zuleika ensured that each guest was provided with a sharp knife for cutting and eating the fruit. When all the preparations were complete and the women were comfortably seated with their refreshments, Zuleika made her move. "Call Joseph," she instructed her servants, loud enough for all her guests to hear. As Joseph entered the room, walking with his characteristic dignity and grace, the reaction was immediate and dramatic. The women, who had come prepared to judge and criticize Zuleika for her supposed lack of self-control, suddenly found themselves face to face with Joseph's extraordinary beauty and presence. The sight of him was so overwhelming, so beyond anything they had imagined, that they completely lost their composure. In their shock and distraction, they continued cutting with their knives, but instead of cutting the fruit in their hands, they accidentally cut their own fingers. Blood began to flow, but they were so mesmerized by Joseph's appearance that they didn't even notice their injuries at first. "Exalted is Allah," they exclaimed in unison, their voices filled with awe and wonder. "This is not a human being, this must be a noble angel." Zuleika watched this scene unfold with a mixture of vindication and triumph. Finally, these women who had been so quick to judge her understood exactly what she had been facing. With a satisfied smile, she addressed her bleeding, awestruck guests. "This is the one about whom you blamed me," she declared. "I did indeed seek to seduce him, but he firmly refused, and if he does not do what I order him, he will surely be imprisoned, and will be among those debased." This gathering marked a crucial turning point in Joseph's story, because now it was no longer just Zuleika who desired him. The demonstration had backfired in a way that Zuleika had not anticipated. While she had succeeded in justifying her own actions, she had also awakened similar desires in all the other women present. Now, instead of facing the unwanted advances of one woman, Joseph found himself the target of multiple women of high social standing, all of whom now understood exactly why Zuleika had been so consumed with passion. Faced with this new and even more dangerous situation, Prophet Joseph did what he had always done in times of trial and difficulty. He turned to Allah in sincere prayer and supplication. His dua, recorded for us in the Quran, reveals the depth of his character and the strength of his faith. O Allah, prison is more beloved to me than that to which they invite me. And if you do not avert from me their plan, I might incline toward them and thus be among the ignorant. Consider the profound wisdom and strength of character revealed in this prayer. Here was a young man who could have had wealth, comfort, and social status if he had simply given in to temptation. Instead, he chose to face the harsh realities of prison rather than compromise his moral principles. This was not just willpower, this was complete surrender to Allah's guidance and an absolute trust in divine wisdom. What an incredible display of inner strength. What remarkable faith. Joseph was essentially saying that he would rather face physical hardship, social disgrace, and the unknown horrors of imprisonment than allow his soul to be corrupted by sin. He understood that true freedom comes not from satisfying every desire, but from maintaining one's integrity in relationship with Allah. Allah, in His infinite mercy and wisdom, accepted Joseph's sincere prayer. The Quran tells us that Allah averted from him the plans and schemes of these women, for indeed Joseph was among Allah's chosen and sincere servants, those who had purified themselves completely for His sake. However, the palace officials now found themselves in an impossible situation. The rumors and gossip had become too widespread to ignore, and the behavior of their own wives and the other noble women had created a scandal that threatened the stability of their social order. Something had to be done to restore order and end the disruption that Joseph's presence was causing. After much deliberation and discussion, they reached a conclusion that they believed would solve all their problems. Joseph would have to be imprisoned. From their perspective, removing him from society would end the temptation he represented, stop the gossip and rumors, and allow their households to return to normal. And so, that terrible day arrived. A day that would test Joseph's faith in ways he had never imagined. Despite his complete innocence, despite having done nothing wrong except maintain his moral principles, Joseph was taken from the relative comfort of the palace and cast into one of Egypt's most notorious prisons. This was not a modern correctional facility with basic human rights and legal protections. This was an ancient dungeon, a place where Egypt's most dangerous criminals were held in conditions that were barely fit for animals. The prison was underground, damp and cold, with little ventilation and almost no natural light. The smell of human misery permeated every corner, and the sounds of despair echoed constantly through the corridors. What must Joseph have felt in that moment? Just hours before, he had been living in a palace, sleeping on comfortable bedding, eating regular meals, and working in relatively pleasant conditions. Now he found himself chained on cold stone floors, surrounded by hardened criminals, with no idea when or if he would ever see freedom again. But here we see the true test of Joseph's character. Instead of falling into despair, instead of questioning Allah's wisdom, instead of allowing bitterness to consume his heart, Joseph maintained his faith and trust. He knew that Allah was just, and he knew that Allah never abandons His faithful servants, even in the darkest circumstances. The first nights in prison were undoubtedly the most difficult. The complete darkness, the cold dampness that seemed to seep into his bones, the putrid air that was hard to breathe, the moans and cries of other prisoners, all of this could have broken the spirit of a lesser man. But Joseph endured it all with patience, knowing that this trial, like all trials, was temporary, while Allah's mercy was eternal. What's remarkable is that even in these horrific conditions, Joseph continued to express gratitude to Allah. While other prisoners cursed their fate and raged against their circumstances, Joseph would say, "O Allah, you have tested me with this trial, and I trust in you completely." Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and months turned into years. Joseph remained in that dungeon, seemingly forgotten by the outside world. Zuleika and her husband continued their lives as if Joseph had never existed. The palace officials who had ordered his imprisonment moved on to other concerns. The world outside the prison walls continued to turn, but for Joseph time seemed to stand still in that place of darkness and despair, yet Allah was watching over his servant, even in that forgotten place. As time passed within the confines of that dark prison, Joseph began to interact with his fellow inmates, and it was here that his true character shone even more brilliantly. Despite being surrounded by hardened criminals, thieves, and violent offenders, Joseph maintained his dignity and moral principles. Rather than allowing the harsh environment to corrupt his soul or embitter his heart, he chose to be a light of guidance and hope for those around him. Joseph helped his fellow prisoners in whatever ways he could. He mediated disputes between inmates who were ready to fight over scraps of food or minor disagreements. He offered comfort to those who despaired of ever seeing freedom again. He shared his own meager rations with prisoners who were sick or weak. His actions spoke louder than any words about the kind of man he truly was. Word of Joseph's character and wisdom spread throughout the prison. Even the guards began to notice that wherever Joseph was present, there was less violence, less despair, and more hope. His very presence seemed to bring a sense of peace and order to an otherwise chaotic environment. It was during this period that 2 new prisoners were brought to the dungeon. These were not common criminals, but men who had held positions of importance in Pharaoh's court. One had been the chief wine bearer, responsible for Pharaoh's drinks and ensuring the ruler's safety from poison. The other had been the chief baker, in charge of Pharaoh's food and meals. Both had fallen from grace for reasons that were whispered about but never fully explained. These 2 men, accustomed to lives of luxury and privilege in Pharaoh's palace, found themselves struggling to adapt to the harsh realities of prison life. They observed Joseph carefully, amazed by his ability to maintain hope and dignity in such dire circumstances. They noticed how other prisoners sought his counsel, how he seemed to possess a wisdom that went far beyond his years. One morning, both men approached Joseph with troubled expressions on their faces. "We have each seen a dream," they told him, "and there is no one here to interpret them for us. But we can see that you are among those who do good, and we sense that you possess knowledge that others do not." Here we witness another example of Joseph's wisdom and his unwavering commitment to his faith. Rather than immediately jumping into dream interpretation, he used this opportunity to share the most important message of all, the knowledge of Allah's unity and the guidance of true faith. "Before any food comes to you," Joseph replied, "I will tell you the interpretation of your dreams. This is part of what Allah has taught me. Indeed, I have abandoned the religion of a people who do not believe in Allah and who deny the hereafter, and I have followed the religion of my fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It is not for us to associate anything with Allah. This is from the favor of Allah upon us and upon humanity, but most people are not grateful." Do you see the profound wisdom in this approach? Joseph could have simply interpreted their dreams and gained their gratitude and respect. Instead, he used this moment as an opportunity to teach them about the oneness of Allah, about the importance of faith, and about the guidance that had been passed down through generations of prophets. Even in prison, even in the darkest circumstances, Joseph remained a messenger of divine truth. Only after establishing this foundation of faith did Joseph proceed to interpret their dreams. To the wine bearer he said, "As for one of you, he will serve wine to his lord as he did before. You will be restored to your former position and will return to Pharaoh's service." To the baker, however, he delivered news that was much more difficult to bear. "As for the other, he will be crucified, and birds will eat from his head. The matter about which you inquired has been decreed." These interpretations were not guesses or wishful thinking. They came from the divine knowledge that Allah had granted to Joseph, the same knowledge that would later make him famous throughout Egypt and beyond. Joseph then made a request that seemed simple but would prove to have profound consequences. "Remember me to your Lord when you return to him," he asked the wine bearer. "Indeed, I am imprisoned unjustly, without having committed any crime." 3 days later, exactly as Joseph had predicted, both interpretations came to pass. Pharaoh celebrated his birthday with a great feast, and as part of the festivities, he reviewed the cases of various prisoners. The wine bearer was pardoned and restored to his former position of honor and trust. The baker, however, was executed exactly as Joseph had foretold. But here's where the story takes a heartbreaking turn. The wine bearer, in his joy at being freed and restored to his comfortable life in the palace, completely forgot about Joseph. Despite Joseph's kindness to him, despite the accurate interpretation that had prepared him for his freedom, despite the clear request to remember him to Pharaoh, the wine bearer became absorbed in his own good fortune and put Joseph completely out of his mind. This was perhaps one of the most difficult periods of Joseph's imprisonment. For the first time since being thrown into prison, he had experienced real hope that his situation might change. He had helped someone who was returning to a position of influence, someone who could potentially speak on his behalf. Yet that person had forgotten him entirely, leaving him to continue languishing in prison with no prospect of release. What did Joseph do during this crushing disappointment? Did he become bitter? Did he curse the ingratitude of the wine-bearer? Did he lose faith in Allah's plan? No, brothers and sisters. Joseph continued to do exactly what he had been doing all along. He maintained his faith, continued his prayers, and kept helping his fellow prisoners. He understood that his freedom would come when Allah decreed it, not when human beings remembered to help him. Days turned into months, months turned into years, and still Joseph remained in prison. The wine-bearer continued his duties in Pharaoh's court, never once mentioning the remarkable young man who had accurately interpreted his dream and changed his life. But Allah had not forgotten his faithful servant. Everything was unfolding according to divine wisdom, even though it might have seemed like Joseph had been abandoned to his fate. During these long years of imprisonment, Joseph was not simply enduring time. He was being prepared for something far greater than he could have imagined. The patience he learned, the wisdom he gained from observing human nature at its worst and best, the deep spiritual insights that came from years of prayer and reflection, all of these were preparing him for a destiny that would affect not just his own life, but the lives of millions of people. The patience Joseph learned in prison was not passive resignation, but active trust in Allah's perfect timing. The leadership skills he developed in managing prison relationships would later serve him in governing an entire nation. The deep empathy he gained from experiencing injustice firsthand would make him a more compassionate ruler. Every day of suffering was actually a day of preparation, though he could not have known it at the time. Then, after several years had passed, something extraordinary happened in Pharaoh's palace that would finally set in motion the events leading to Joseph's freedom. One night, Pharaoh had a vivid and disturbing dream that he could not forget. In his dream, he saw 7 fat, healthy cows grazing peacefully by the river. Suddenly, 7 lean, sickly cows emerged from the water and devoured the fat cows, though they remained just as thin as before. In the same dream, he also saw 7 green, full ears of grain, followed by 7 dry, withered ears that somehow consumed the green ones. When Pharaoh awoke, he was deeply troubled by these strange visions. The images remained vivid in his mind, and he sensed that they carried important meaning, but he could not understand what that meaning might be. In ancient times, dreams were considered important messages, especially for rulers, so Pharaoh immediately summoned all his advisors, wise men, and magicians. "I have seen a dream," he announced to the assembled court, "and I must know its interpretation." The wise men and magicians listened carefully as Pharaoh described his dream in detail. They conferred among themselves, proposed various theories, and offered interpretations that ranged from the mystical to the political. Some suggested it meant military victories, others thought it predicted religious changes, and still others believed it concerned Pharaoh's personal life. But none of their interpretations satisfied Pharaoh. Deep in his heart, he sensed that this dream carried a message of vital importance to his kingdom, but none of his advisors seemed to truly understand its meaning. Their explanations felt forced and unconvincing. It was at this moment of frustration and uncertainty that the wine-bearer, who had been present during these discussions, suddenly remembered something he had forgotten for years. Like a flash of lightning, the memory of his time in prison came flooding back to him. "My Lord Pharaoh," he exclaimed, stepping forward with obvious excitement, "I have just remembered something that might help. There is a young Hebrew man in the prison who possesses remarkable abilities in dream interpretation. Years ago, when I was imprisoned, he correctly interpreted dreams for both myself and the chief baker. Everything he predicted came to pass exactly as he said it would." Pharaoh was immediately interested. "Bring this man to me at once," he commanded. Messengers were dispatched to the prison with orders to bring Joseph before Pharaoh. After years of imprisonment, after being forgotten and ignored, Joseph's name was finally being spoken in the highest circles of Egyptian power. But when the messengers arrived at the prison and summoned Joseph to appear before Pharaoh, they encountered something unexpected. Instead of rushing eagerly toward what could be his freedom, Joseph gave them a message that demonstrated once again the strength of his character and his unwavering commitment to justice. "Return to your lord," Joseph told the messengers, "and ask him about the case of the women who cut their hands. Indeed, Allah knows well of their scheme." What incredible courage this required. Here was a man who had been imprisoned for years, finally being offered a chance to appear before the most powerful person in the land, and he was essentially saying, "Not until my innocence is established and justice is served." This was not pride or stubbornness on Joseph's part. This was a principled stand for truth and justice. Joseph understood that simply being released from prison was not enough if his reputation remained tainted by false accusations. He wanted not just freedom, but vindication. When Pharaoh received this message, he was both surprised and impressed. This was not the response of a typical prisoner desperate for freedom. This was the response of someone who valued truth and justice more than personal comfort. Intrigued by Joseph's character, Pharaoh decided to investigate the matter thoroughly. Pharaoh summoned all the women who had been involved in the original incident, including Zuleika herself. "What was your affair when you sought to seduce Joseph?" he asked them directly. The women, now confronted by Pharaoh himself and unable to maintain their pretenses, spoke truthfully. "Perfect is Allah. We know of no evil from him at all." And then Zuleika, faced with the authority of Pharaoh and the weight of truth, finally admitted what had really happened. Now the truth has emerged. "It was I who sought to seduce him, and indeed he is among the truthful." At long last, after years of suffering under false accusations, Joseph's innocence was publicly acknowledged. The truth that had been hidden for so long was finally brought into the light for all to see. When Joseph received word that his innocence had been established, he made a statement that revealed the nobility of his character. "That is so Zuleika's husband might know that I did not betray him in his absence, and that Allah does not guide the plan of betrayers." Notice that even after years of unjust imprisonment, Joseph harbored no desire for revenge. He simply wanted the truth to be known and justice to be served. Now cleared of all charges, and with his reputation restored, Joseph was brought before Pharaoh with full honors. The conversation between them revealed not only Joseph's ability to interpret dreams, but also his remarkable understanding of economics, agriculture, and governance. After Joseph explained the meaning of Pharaoh's dream, 7 years of abundance followed by 7 years of severe famine, Pharaoh was deeply impressed by both the interpretation and the practical wisdom that Joseph displayed in suggesting how Egypt should prepare for the coming crisis. "Today you are established in position and trusted," Pharaoh declared. "You shall be in charge of managing this crisis and ensuring our kingdom's survival." Joseph, demonstrating both humility and confidence, made a proposal that would change the course of history. "Appoint me over the storehouses of the land. Indeed, I am a knowing guardian." And so the young man who had been rotting in prison just days before was suddenly elevated to one of the highest positions in the Egyptian government. But what did Joseph do with this newfound power? Did he seek revenge against those who had wronged him? Did he use his position for personal gain? No, brothers and sisters. Joseph immediately began implementing the wise policies needed to save Egypt from the coming famine. He used his authority to serve justice, to help his people, and to fulfill the trust that had been placed in him. The years in prison had not been wasted. They had prepared Joseph for this moment, this responsibility, this opportunity to serve Allah and humanity on a scale he never could have imagined. What profound lessons can we extract from Joseph's prison years? First lesson: patience is stronger than any hardship. Joseph endured years of unjust imprisonment without complaint, without losing faith, without becoming bitter. He understood that every difficulty is temporary, while Allah's justice is eternal. In our modern world, when we face even minor hardships, we often immediately complain and lose hope. But Joseph shows us that true strength lies in patience and perseverance. Second lesson: trust in Allah is the source of hope. Even in the darkest moments, Joseph never stopped trusting in Allah's wisdom and mercy. He knew that Allah never abandons His faithful servants. When we face difficulties in our lives, we must remember to maintain our trust in Allah, knowing that He knows what is best for us. Third lesson: hardships are preparation for greater purposes. Joseph's years in prison were not wasted time. They were preparation for his future role as a leader who would save millions of lives. The challenges we face may also be preparing us for responsibilities and opportunities we cannot yet imagine. Fourth lesson: truth may be delayed, but it is never defeated. Despite years of suffering under false accusations, Joseph's innocence was eventually revealed. Truth has a way of emerging, no matter how long it takes. When we are wronged or misunderstood, we must have patience and trust that justice will ultimately prevail. Fifth lesson: gratitude transforms suffering into blessing. Even in prison, Joseph continued to thank Allah and help others. When we maintain gratitude during difficult times, we transform our perspective and find meaning in our struggles. How can we apply Joseph's prison experience to our own lives? Learn to be grateful during hardship. Joseph thanked Allah even while imprisoned. Let us try to see the blessings we have, even during our most difficult moments. Never neglect prayer. Joseph continued his prayers and relationship with Allah throughout his imprisonment. Prayer is our most powerful tool during times of trial. Continue helping others. Even in prison, Joseph helped his fellow inmates. We should never stop doing good, regardless of our circumstances. Never compromise on justice. Joseph insisted on clearing his name before accepting freedom. We must never abandon our principles, even when it would be easier to do so. Look to the future with hope. Joseph never lost sight of the fact that his situation was temporary. We must remember that our struggles are also temporary, while Allah's mercy is eternal. Brothers and sisters, Joseph's prison story is actually a light that illuminates all our lives. Each of us, at some point in our lives, may feel as if we are in our own prison, whether at work, at school, in family situations, or in society. We may face injustice, be misunderstood, or encounter seemingly insurmountable challenges. But Joseph's story teaches us this fundamental truth. Allah never abandons His faithful servants. Every hardship carries within it the promise of ease. Every dark night is followed by the dawn of a new day. Joseph's patience and hope were rewarded with one of the highest positions in Egypt. Your patience and hope may be rewarded with the beautiful future that Allah has prepared specifically for you. Therefore, look at the difficulties in your life through Joseph's eyes. Be patient, maintain your hope, and trust in Allah's perfect plan. How has this story affected you? In which of your life's challenges can you follow Joseph's example? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences might inspire other brothers and sisters in faith. If this video has been beneficial, don't forget to like it and subscribe to our channel. Share these videos with your loved ones so that more people can benefit from these Islamic stories that can transform lives and perspectives. May Allah be pleased with you. In our next videos, we will continue to share the stories of those who walked on the path of Allah. Until that beautiful moment arrives, be patient and trust in Allah. Life is short, every moment is precious. Let us keep our hearts alive with Islamic stories and Islamic values. May Allah protect you. Until we meet again.